I would like to highlight my perspective to be rising in terms of political engagement and the rise in terms of economic reforms as well. So rising in Africa would mean personally for me as a young person who comes from, I'm 22. I just recently graduated from college. I'm interested in the area in politics, international relations. So I studied international relations. So this shows that I'm an optimist person, because it's not a lot of people who, whenever you study international relations, people are like, you want to go into politics? Are you for sure? I don't think you'll be able to make it. That's how our society perceives it. So I see rising in Africa in terms of a time where youth are not just included, but trusted as co-creators of policy and development agendas. I also see when youth initiatives are funded, not just featured when they're successful by their own means, and when their contribution shapes budgets, national budgets, and of course, and I would like to really highlight on this, peace processes. I am a very strong advocate of youth peace and security agenda in alignment with the women peace and security agenda. I can clearly tell you that in peace processes that are currently going on in Ethiopia, there's not a single woman on the panels, not a single young person or claimed young person who are taking place. So that is Africa rising for me. There will be a time where structural reforms, when youth are in structural reforms, youth are engaged in climate negotiations. So it's not just about presence, or it's not just a, what do you call it? It's not just a tokenistic placement of African youth, but a time where youth are leading national dialogues, they're having meaningful conversations, and that's when they get the power to decide on the future. Because trust me, it's too many of us in our continent. It's too many of young people on the continent, more than people that are, more than any part of the world. So I would like to highlight that. Thank you.
Yeah, those were really insightful. And I'm thinking about the kind of the theme of youth engagement, and how very often, I mean, I know we've kind of, like you were saying, you're going to the ECOSOC Youth Forum next week. And I think a lot of these spaces for youth tend to be very siloed. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about how a lot of times youth engagement seems quite performative or very event driven, like go to this summit and it's for 3 days and then you go home, and then it's like, but you didn't even get to really engage with like the stakeholders that can make those decisions. So I'm wondering if you know, like if you have any ideas of pathways that can be created so that there is more intergenerational dialogue.
I guess that one was for the question for you, Kathleen. You know, summits and no tangible things are not just African thing; it's a world thing right now. I've been in a lot of summits in my past years as I was mandated, and not a lot of sessions I was part of made an impact. Not only it's not just about me overall, but in general. And so in my year as the African UN Youth Delegate Program, we have developed a mandate document. Our mandates were in alignment with regional and international organizations, and it had 3 components on it: youth and employment, which is an issue in East Africa, overall the world, but something that's very close to our hearts in our region. There's also meaningful youth engagement, and we also have youth and peace and security. So we had tangible demands based on research that supported each and every of our mandates. So that's when we had I'm sure you're going to hear the word token every now and then when it comes to youth engagement, because youth participation and meaningful youth engagement are two separate things, because you can tick boxes by having youth in the room but not giving them the chance to speak or get to engage with the process. So that's when we started to have about a conversation about these things that we came up with one tangible demand, which we call the youth sounding boards. So we asked international organizations and different development partners all around the world to start, especially our focus is on, again, East Africa, to have youth sounding boards. A good model would be the European Union Youth Sounding Board that runs in different countries in our region. I know, and I'm aware, I'm also part of the Youth Sounding Board in Ethiopia, but the EU has a youth sounding board in Kenya and then in Tanzania. Which are pretty much new because Ethiopia was the first one to launch it. And that's when EU projects come up on the table for the youth to go through them, to give comments, to make it more grassroots level and tangible, with tangible incomes. So that's how we do our first mandate, how our first demand. So to turn events into summits, we can, whenever there's a practical, I mean, I don't think every event is practical and tangible, expected to have that level of outcomes. But when it comes to bigger events like a huge event, we can have small caucus groups, we can have small boards that follow up on the outcomes of the event, and we can follow up on that as well. And besides that, for starters, on the YPS mandate, or using Youth in Peace and Security mandate of our document, there's one demand that says progress reports. A lot of countries in Africa don't have a national action plan for youth peace security agenda. I think Ms. Oumou would definitely back me up on this. It's been a tough road for us because we don't have both women peace and security and youth peace and security agenda national action plans in most countries. So having a progress report that keeps countries and different stakeholders accountable would definitely help the process. So there was a global progress report in 2016 that was published by the Secretary General. For your reference, you can go back to that. We referenced that sample to be used in the YPS progress report. So whenever there's a YPS conference in Africa, you can come, attend, then you can follow up on the outcomes based on the progress report. What has changed from this time to this time? What changes have the 10 or 50 or 100 conferences made overall in the past few years? So I would just like to highlight on these two things, but I'll make sure to find a way, if you'd like to approach me later, to send you our mandate documents, which are pretty tangible and which are based on progress and impact for the past few in our 1 year actually mandate. Thank you.
So thank you very much. I think that Amen has raised very important points, especially when it comes to young people attending meetings, and then there's no more follow-up to what has been discussed or to the recommendations that has been, adopted during the summits. So I think it's one of the challenge that we have seen within the continent that a lot of youth-led organization and projects are facing is the funding, especially reaching out to stakeholders is really a challenge for them to be able to implement their project. And something that we have thought about at the African Union is really having this workshops of capacity building in which young people can, attend and can learn from it, and also will be able to have the necessary tool in order to move forward in their projects, and especially when it comes to reaching out to the government official. This is also another challenge that they are facing as well. Regarding the monitoring and evaluation of the projects, it's also one of the tools that we are kind of offering workshops on, because it's very important for those NGOs, CSOs to be able to know how to write their progress reports as well as their reviews in order to be able to present it when it comes to high-level meetings. Then regarding the national action plans that Amen has raised, I think so far we have only one great example of national action plan for young people for YPS, which is in the Democratic Republic of Congo in DRC. And it's a very good example because we have seen how the young people have been very active and have been able to participate in, I would say, in decision-making table. Very recently, last year in December, there was a continental dialogue with the champion of YPS, who is the president of Burundi. And he was sitting with young people, exchanging and, giving them some recommendation, hearing from them what are the challenges on the ground. And I think this is an example that we have to reproduce more often over, across the countries in Africa. Thank you.
I think for me, I'll keep my response very simple and short. Beyond photo ops, I think Amen talked about the tokenistic nature of most of these summits and events. We need, as people, we really need to invest in institutional memory and civic infrastructure. And what do I mean? We need to build capacity of young people at a very early stage. And this means that looking at even just our curriculums, education curriculums, what are we teaching young people? Are we teaching them leadership from a young age? And if we can invest in that and build capacity and initiate that spark and that passion in them from a young age, they're able to carry that on even as they grow older and try and influence policy at a more macro level. But also, I think at a broader level, we also need to advocate for like institutional reforms. In Zambia, one of the things that we're doing with the Center for Young Leaders in Africa currently is that we're advocating for constitutional reforms around election cycles, because our electoral process is very, what's the opposite of not inclusive? It's not inclusive. It doesn't include young people, women, as well as people living with disabilities. And what we're saying is that the government should be able to reform the constitution, which is very archaic. It's a constitution that we inherited from our colonizers, for lack of a better term, and it doesn't reflect the realities of the young people, of the women today. And so we're calling for what we're saying, a mixed member electoral system that combines first past the post as well as fair representation of young people in parliament. So if we're able to do this, if our constitutions reflect that, it's easy for young people to then pass on that knowledge. It's like it's sustainable, rather than where we come for like these meetings, we speak, and then it ends there. We go back to our homes, and it ends there. So I think we should be able to like reform our constitutions, even holding organizations like the African Union, for example, accountable. I know you talked about the African Youth Charter. How many of us know what the criteria for that is? Who even goes? Because I know like a number of young people in my country that are doing tremendous work, but they've never benefited from programs like this. So you start asking and wondering to say, who are these really designed for? And when we have the privilege that we have right now as young people to be in these spaces, and we have people representing such organizations, we should be able to like really boldly ask and also pass on that knowledge as we go back to the spaces where people that look like us, that do not have the privileges to be in these spaces, pass on this knowledge and tell them that this is where they can influence, this is where they can actually take part in. And that's how I think we were able to transform. Thank you.
Yeah, that kind of goes on into a little bit one of my other questions, which is that one thing I've noticed from going to a lot of summits is it seems like Africa is kind of approached as like one single block and not taken into account like the myriad of cultures and identities that exist. Is that something you've noticed happens? And do you have any maybe like solutions or ideas about how to kind of challenge those beliefs, those really monolithic beliefs? If you want to start.
I can start because this morning that I had to explain Nigeria and Ethiopia are two different parts of Africa. And when I told them Nigeria is in West Africa, they didn't know. So it's like African youth, and problems are like the same for everyone. And our only problem is our skin color. That's how people take it. But we have a lot of problems in our own continents, in our own context, and we have a lot of different problems as like different climate problems, different political problems, different problems with different solutions. But moving on, I mean, we can come back, and because like unless and otherwise, it's more of a huge open wide youth space. I don't find a lot of African youth representing different regions of Africa and different platforms. So I usually tend to advise that because it's like 6 of us from East Africa. It's usually 12 of us from East Africa, like 2 from each country, as I mentioned earlier, and some people expect us or see us to represent the whole continent. So I usually would like to take the center part of it, like coming into the middle and trying to understand all problems, all solutions in a common lens. But again, if you come up here and see like a woman, you could not talk for all women's problems, but you can talk about a woman who you have seen and related with. So same thing applies for Africa. It's not, African youth and Amin's problems are shorts or African problems. No, that's a whole lot, 2 different things. So the challenges faced when it comes to these things, I would suggest using intersectional data. There's a lot of them, a lot of data is being published by the African Union even, and different regional stakeholders. And now there are exchange programs going on all over Africa. So I have been able to visit Cote d'Ivoire for starters, like in West Africa. And I've had a lot of conversations with youth from Cote d'Ivoire, from different parts of Cote d'Ivoire. So I sort of feel and understand what their issues are because they're from different parts of the country with different constituencies. So being able to engage with them online and offline doing researches, we can now break the thought that African youth is the same. We're not, I promise you. There are language barriers as well for me. I come from a country which we say like this: we were never colonized, so we have our own language as our own national language, Amharic. So English is like, for some people, it's their 3rd language, and we're not French speaking. So that's not really a common thing for a lot of African countries. A lot of countries speak in English or French. So there are the language barriers, and there are different differences overall. But we can come to the central ground, use intersectional data, and we can also build the sense of Pan-Africanism to have regional voices on stages like these. I hope I answered your question right.
So, sorry. No, I just wanted to ask you to rephrase, if it's possible, the question that you've asked.
Yeah. So I was just remarking on how a lot of times, like at summits that I've been to, they kind of just ascribe one like identity to Africa. Like they don't really take into account, how many countries there are in Africa and like languages, and if there may be ways to ameliorate that. That I know it's a heavy question, but.
No, thank you very much for this question. I mean, when I first joined the African Union, it was really interesting because when we were introducing ourselves, no one was allowed to say from which country we are. So it's something that is, you come as an African, you join the African Union as an African, and not as someone from Western Africa or, dividing the continent or whatever. So I think it has a very strong message, because when you join as an African, then you don't have to explain or to maybe say from where you are, and you see your other colleague as just as equal as you. There's no country above the other, you see. So I think the question is very important. And when it comes also to official languages at the African Union, we have recognized our very first official language, African official language, which is the Swahili. And that was done just 2 years ago. And I think it's a great milestone because, working in Swahili is just, a very good beginning. And hopefully we'll be able to be a continent more united throughout the years. Thank you.
Well, I think this is a very hard question to answer. But I'll try to just narrow it a little bit to young people. I love young people and I love to speak for the youths. So I would love to say Africa is it's a very beautifully complex continent. 1.4 billion people, 55 different countries, millions of different cultures and languages, right? And all these people have their different problems that they face, different challenges. And in my work with grassroots organizations like the Center for Young Leaders in Africa, as well as Girls Gone Political, we are intentional about localization because we recognize that it's not a one-size-fits-all. What might be youth priorities in Zambia might not be youth priorities in Senegal, right? For example, in Zambia, one of the main issues that we face and are trying to fight against as young people is illicit financial flows and how that impedes on education, on gender equality, and stuff like that. But these issues are not priorities for young people in Namibia, for example, right? So I think it's about listening to the young people and listening intently to what it is that they want to drive, right? And then when we come to looking at the question on how do we then frame that Africa is different? Yes, even like with all these different cultures and languages that shape the continent, there's obviously certain things that make us Africans, like there's certain things that make us unique and the same, right? And I think that's where the question comes in terms of how do we move away from describing Africa as just one monolith, right? But yeah, my point is just like listening to the different priorities, the different challenges that the African youths face. They're not a one-size-fits-all. It's that different according to different cultures, different countries and regions. Thank you.
Okay, so I wanted to take a chance or give you a chance to kind of flip the script. I think, Diego, do you have a mic that you can pass around? Okay. Or, yeah, that works too. If you have any questions you want to ask of our panelists, feel free.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Joyce, and okay, I don't have to touch it. Right? Okay. All right, I'll just stay. Yes. So I am actually glad to be in spaces like this because when I attend this kinds of summits, I always look forward to seeing Africans and people that I can really associate with because, you know, this place is so individualistic. And if you don't have a community, then sometimes you wonder if you are in the right room. But yeah, I'm glad I'm in a space like this. So my question is kind of complex. And I need you to just stay with me. And I don't want anyone to take this the wrong way. I'm just asking as it comes to mind. First of all, thinking about the idea behind African rising from passion to progress in youth engagement. Sometimes, coming here, I felt like this session is going to be about young people, African young people, I don't know if that makes sense, who are passionate about the problems in their home countries, and they are making progress to get involved in getting rid of those problems. And this panel seems to me like a report of what our awesome panelists are doing in various African countries, and they are telling us about it, which is great. But then I begin to wonder, what about people back at home who don't have access to these kinds of spaces? How do they learn what we're learning now? And it brings me to Loretta's point where she mentioned that African Rising is about African youth reclaiming leadership. And you give examples of protest in some places, in some countries. I am a Nigerian, and I don't know if anyone here heard of NSAS, the NSAS protest. People who protested are not here. Most of them don't even think of maybe getting visas to come to the United States. But then what happens to them? And now the protest has come and gone, and nobody is talking about it. Nobody is talking about the victims of the protest. And most of them who have the opportunity to run away are outside Nigeria. If you tell them to go back and protest and tell them, oh, our president will soon leave, do you think they will listen to you? Of course not, because it's already been a trend of older people being in positions of power. So I don't want to take much of your time, but then how do these programs, how do this information, how does it benefit people that are not in spaces like this? And also, what do we that are here after hearing this report, what do we do? What advice do you have for us? How do you think we can? Most of us don't want to go back home because of all the things that are happening. But how do you think we can help from afar, even if we don't want to go back? I know we have like organizations. I am a co-founder of Bridge, where we talk about intimate partner violence, but still we talk about it in the context of Black people in the United States. And it sickens me to my bone, because before I am a Black person, I am a Nigerian, I am Yoruba, and I need the people that I sort of represent here to also benefit from it. But now I am stuck somehow. So what do we do? How do we help? Yeah, I don't want to be emotional.
Yeah, um, honestly, in this panel, we were also thinking of covering the optimist aspect of it. I think there will have been other questions where we'd reflect on tools on what to do. But I'm really grateful that you mentioned the idea of access. I mean, honestly, in the past few years, what I've seen is what we can do is just advocate for it, call on it, because whenever there are relevant things to discuss about, they're either in New York or Geneva or Vienna. It's never Nairobi. It's never Addis, especially in the UN context. It's never. So UN actually sits in Nairobi and in Addis, so you would understand the challenges. So the things about access, there's no way I would be able to respond to it. It's one of the toughest things to see people who we have worked for a whole year to come up here and to give our ideas, our concerns, our opinions towards some things. And once it's September and when it's time to go to a relevant thing to present something, you don't have visa or tickets. By the time you get your visa, tickets are already sold out, or the whole overall issues with access. And unless and otherwise you're officially accredited by governments, you have no access to the rooms where actual conversations are being made. And because of that, you will not be able to listen on anything, and governments are not willing to give those accreditations for their political reasons as well. So it's a very huge challenge. It's a gap. I cannot say this or that for that solution. I've been advocating for a year. Ethiopia has never had a UN youth delegate. I'm not sure if Nigeria has had one. I'm sure with my research, only 3 African countries had UN youth delegates last year. 2 years ago, it was South Africa, Uganda, and Rwanda. And after that, they didn't even have one last year. So you can see it's a challenge. It's still it's a passion in most African people's hearts, but it's been also a struggle taking a leap towards these things to get them and be able to engage. So this is me sitting on this table, trying to reflect on the tiny rays of hope that I've been seeing the past year, but it's not really the overall final truth. Like, there were a lot of challenges throughout the road. So I would be able to just report on what I did last year, but I can tell you about how half of my demands were dropped because they were too political. I can tell you about how half of the riots going on in my country, I cannot talk to you about it on this table because I can't. Or I cannot tell you about my personal interest area, media rights, and how my people are not covering the right stories on the table. So for people who are at heart passionate about such things, what we can do is advocate for things tiny, step by step. That's what I've learned. You cannot just boom, unless and otherwise you're lucky, or you'll be boomed. But until we get to that point, we get to that level where speaking out, pushing for change in a wider and the larger context comes to our hands. Every tiny opportunity. Look at what you just did right here. We can do that. I used to do that. I did that back at home. What you did right here, and a lot of our African youth are doing in their own countries. So taking every tiny opportunity, building up to it, saying what we have to say in a diplomatic way, just like you did again, and a few other local initiatives. Africans, we have a lot of young people who are doing their local initiatives. In my country, I've lost count on youth associations, youth initiatives, which are not supported by anyone, just mobilizing. How many of you guys are aware of the Sudan war that's been going on? Okay, I see a lot of hands. That's good. And on that war, it's the Sudanese youth that have been supporting their community while they're struggling on basic humanitarian needs. So the youth there, they mobilized and covered about $1.3 million worth of humanitarian support in a country that's literally right now going under a very high level of conflict. So that's the tiny steps we're doing in our continent. So, I mean, yeah, it might feel a bit of reporting, but I'm trying to outshine how we're still surviving in the sense of what's going on in our continent, really, really. Thank you for the question, though.
You said your name is Joy, right? I love your energy and I love your passion. And honestly, I'm glad that you addressed the elephant in the room, because I think as young people, we should be bold enough and we shouldn't be apologetic about issues that matter to us. I don't know if you heard what I said when I was answering the question. For me as a young person, there's a time in my advocacy journey that I couldn't even access places like the National Assembly because I wasn't politically aligned. I wasn't supporting any political party in my country, right? And these are the challenges that most young people face: access to these rooms of opportunity. And one thing that I said is that as young people that have the privilege to be in this space, we also have a duty. Okay, we have a duty to take whatever information, whatever resources that we can garner from these places back to the local grassroots people that cannot be here, because the reality is that it's very difficult for everybody to be in these spaces. It takes time. It takes sometimes even it's about who you know and people who can vouch for you to be in these spaces. But I think we can, right now, I think the world is even easier. We can leverage social media, for example. Just go live, record this session here, let the people that are back home in Zambia watch, they'll pick up something. But also it's about us as young people. Like I know, for example, after this, I'm going to be part of a webinar where now I translate whatever it is that we're talking here to the people that couldn't make it in these spaces. So we have a duty as well to pass on this information to the people that are not in these spaces. And then also partnering with like-minded individuals. Reach out to someone someone in a different country, in a different region. Ask them, how do you find yourself in these spaces? Because at the end of the day, even the Bible says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. People just don't know, but the information is there. But that information, you only get it when you connect and speak to people. So don't be an island. Like, get out of the shell, speak to people, and then doors open. Like, doors open. I never imagined myself speaking at the UN, for example, right? But I continued. I believed in what I was doing. I believed in the young people. I believe in the work that young people do and how the progress that the young people can bring to the table. And I continued doing that advocacy. I use social media, leverage social media to do my work. And I was recognized to say, oh, this is a young person that we can bring to these spaces. And even when you're in these spaces, you aimed your support there. Don't be apologetic. Like, speak truth to power, and people will listen. So it's not an easy thing, and I think at the end of the day, we are the ones that are going to chart the kind of future that we want, and we must not give up. Thank you.
So thank you, Joyce, for this very important and very crucial question, I would say. Within the African Union, I don't know how many of you have been on the website of the African Union. Can you please raise your hands? Not many. But I think you should go more often on the website, because when it comes to summit, when it comes to meetings, to workshops, everything is on the website. And as my sister was just saying, social media. Social media is key. It's powerful. Everything is shared on it. For example, we have the ECOSOC within the African Union. I know that the UN has the Economic and Social Chamber, but the African Union does have the ECOSOC system within the continent. And we do register all the NGOs, the CSOs from all over the sectors. You know, you can have it from, I mean, it can be technology, it can be on economic or on social or on political, legal, depending on the type, the background of your NGO, but it's important to register within the African Union ECOSOC system in order to be able to access information about the meetings, to register for meetings, and also to pass the knowledge or the information to, you know, to other people. And especially our aim within the ECOSOC is to reach the grassroots, and not only having leader coming, but also the grassroots, to be able for them to understand what the work is, what we're doing as work at the African Union, and also to be able to support them, whether it's financially or in terms of advocacy within the continent. Thank you.
Are there any questions? I'll ask one.
Thank you very much for taking the time. I'm sure it's not easy to take. Cheers. Thank you. First, I have 3 questions, but my first question is more like a remark. I don't know if I'll call you Miss or Mrs. Oumou, or I'll just call you Sister Oumou. Well, you made mention of the practice within the UN not acknowledging, you're not allowed to identify yourself by where you come from, and then as long as you're in those halls, you're an African. And that fills me with warmth. But then it also raises a question as to in what halls do actually these conversations of diversity actually come in? Because I'm aware of how long it took for them to actually decide or make a resolution on what language they would decide to work on. It's very disappointing, by the way, that it took that long. But do they ever have these conversations? That's one. Like, do they actually acknowledge the diversity when in those halls, or they just keep using this one-shoe-fits-all narrative all through how operations are run within the African Union? I don't know. That's my first question. I don't know to what degree the United Nations is represented here, but my second question is this. What is the policy of the United Nations when it comes to engaging or dealing with matters that involves the African youth? Now, I'm not talking about pushing a narrative. I'm talking about actionable plans. Like, what are the, narratives turned to policies? We've seen how policies have been made, and policies are actually what change the way governments move. So what kind of narratives are converted to policies that have been made that are specifically targeted to improve the situation of the African youths in Africa? Now, that's the first part of the question. Now, the second part of the question is this. We know that the African Union, the United Nations, in collaboration with all of its joint ventures, I call them a joint venture. We have the IMF.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. We end at 3:20, so if you could ask maybe like 1 or 2 of the questions. I know, I'm sorry.
Okay,
But
whichever one you choose to decide. Here's the thing, it's still important that we at least be thinking about these questions. To what degree are they willing to push to actually make sure these things are done? Because we know that they're not shy when it comes to economic sanctions, when these leaders are not moving according to what they want, So to what degree are they willing to go to use this system of sanctions to actually get these policies to actually be implemented on the continent? Thank you very much.
We understand that there is a lot of questions for this awesome panel, and we are extremely proud that you guys want to engage so much. However, due to the time crunch, that is 3:20, that is going to be the last question that they're going to answer. Then we're going to head up to the closing ceremony. However, you can still talk individually with the panelists and voice some of your concerns, voice some of your questions, look for some advice, talk about specific tools. We will actually close on some specific organizations or activist organizations that you guys have worked with in the past that you would recommend that these people can work with. So if we can address the question, then head on to that. That would be best. I'm so sorry. I understand that you all have a lot of questions, but the time crunch is killing us. But thank you.
Sorry, may I have your name? Sorry? Accommodate. So thank you very much for this question. And we actually had the same question. I had the same question when I heard about, the African Union adopting Swahili as the fourth language, official language, because I was wondering why we didn't do it since 1963. So it took so long, and I agree with that. But there's, always a beginning to everything. And we want to, at the African Union, we want to speak with one voice. Of course, I know that Africa is rich from its diversity, from, the ethnic, I would say the ethnic part, but it's important that we start at one point. And we have done it with the Swahili. we never know. Maybe there will be another, official language, but it's always good to speak with one voice. And I'm not sure if you have heard about the Common African Position, but it's actually a text. I mean, there are so many Common African positions that we adopt every year, but we are trying to speak internationally with one voice through this Common African Position. I don't know if the other panelists want to give an answer.
To the second question you mentioned, I mean, that's the UN space to honestly answer. There's no one from UN on this panel, and I don't know if my sister would know, but directly when it comes to the African youth, I have never heard of anything, and I personally don't feel like there's the need for that, because overall, young people, there's for starters, in the Pact for the Future, there's a chapter for youth and for the future generations. So that speaks to the African youth as well. And there's also, when it comes to peace and security, there are also 4 actions on the Pact for the Future highlighting youth peace and security. That also relates for Africa. When it comes to unemployment or like sustainability, there are different chapters on the Pact that address the youth overall. So that should be enough. So I would recommend maybe referencing. I don't think we really lack perfect policies. I'm not giving a general answer to that, but it's about more of the implementation issues that we're having in Africa and of course all over the world. So I would suggest referring to those documents. Thank you.
And maybe just to add to that, I don't know if you are familiar or if you've ever heard of the Sustainable Development Goals. Yes, so that is one of the things. By the way, I'm not speaking for the UN, I'm just speaking as a young person. That's one way in which I think the UN also helps, because, the Global Agenda 2030 is a very powerful way in which young people are being recognized and being supported, right? It's 17 different goals, and all those, when you really read them and understand, you see that at the center, at the core of everything that these goals are trying to achieve, it's young people, it's women at the core of these goals. And I think that's one way that they are supporting, even just the Pact for the Future. Last year, during the high-level political forum, we adopted the Pact for the Future. And the Pact for the Future looks at some of the youth priorities. And it's young people like you and me that sat in these negotiations, coming up with these documents that feed into the youth priorities, what it is that we want. It's young people that are documenting. So one challenge that I notice is that when these processes, these policies are put in place, we are lazy as young people. We don't go back to read and see and understand what is it that member states are committed to do for young people. Because the UN is not the one that is going to implement this at local level, it's our governments, right? And we have to hold these governments accountable to say, during the high-level political forum, the Pact for the Future was adopted. This is what was said. How are you localizing this to the youths in Nairobi? How are you localizing this to the youths in Lagos? Right? But then the challenge is that when we come out from these things, we take all these fancy, flashy pictures, we speak all this English, and it ends there. But we need to go back, like open that document, read it, and also contextualize it, like put it in a language that an average person would understand. Because if these people understand why these processes are important for them and what it would do for their lives, then they begin to engage meaningfully. And the UN is supporting these processes. All these different UN entities, UNDP, UNICEF, they have amazing programs that are supporting African youth. So you won't see the policy like, it's not in our face like that, but when you read and when you do your fair share of research, you will find that the programs are a lot. Even African Union, for example, they have the African Youth Charter and clusters. So like all this is stuff that's there for us to take advantage of. But like I said, we are lazy. as young people. We want to be spoon-fed and given things on a silver platter. So we also have work to do. Thank you.
And maybe just to add as well, there are different, documents that has been adopted, like very recently within the UN has a UN Youth Affairs Office, and they have a document called the Strategic Plan for I think 2024 to 2028. So maybe it's important to go through the document and to read about what are, the recommendation, what they want the young people to implement in the next years. Within the African Union, for example, we have the Silencing the Guns flagship project. And it's a project that tends to promote peace on the continent, and we rely a lot on young people. We want them actually to take ownership of this program and to be able to implement peace in their region or in their country. There's a document for the Silencing the Guns project, which is called the Master Roadmap to Silence the Guns within the African continent. And this Master Roadmap will just give you all the directive. It's like a guideline that will help people to find a way in order to be able to do more actions towards peace on the continent. So I think it's very important to search for those documents, and everything is there. For example, this year, the African Union has the theme of the year of the African Union for 2025 is justice for African descent through reparation, for example. And we have an orientation concept note. And in this orientation concept note, you'll be able to see what are the actions that we are recommending the NGOs, the CSOs to do in order to be able to implement this theme throughout the year. And of course, it's not enough, but it's very helpful and it's insightful. So please take a look at our websites, whether it's the UN or the African Union, and you'll be able to find out a lot of documents and a lot of guidelines for your projects and which will help you to move forward in your implementation of projects. Thank you.
Okay, so I just have one final question of our moderators. If you can try to condense it and then we'll end, but are there any opportunities, programs, action plans that exist or that should exist? And for the ones that do exist that anyone in the audience can take advantage of?
Okay. She pushed the mic to me, so I guess I just have to start. I'm just joking. The AU, of course, as Ms. Oumou mentioned earlier, they have the volunteer corps that runs in different parts of Africa. There's that, and there are different opportunities that come up with the AU Youth Envoy as well. In our context, I'm speaking if you're based in Africa, and if you're based for starters in the US, more opportunities because you get to access forums like the Executive Forum, their high-level political forum that's coming up, and there's also around the UNGA. Even though we can't get access to the UNGA, there are other side events going around. So it's a very good momentum in New York appearing on that because there's a very few Voices of Africans. I would like to invite you to one event for starters that's happening on Wednesday, midday, 1 p.m. at the Permanent Mission of Ireland. That's organized by me and my colleagues from different parts of Africa. It will be a good session where we'll be discussing because of the theme of the Executive Forum is also one of the SDGs 8. We'll be having conversation about unemployment. So those opportunities, and also the African Union Youth Peace Ambassadors Program. I think I say that right. That's also a good program. I don't know how much years one delegate has, but it's a good program that if people start to engage with it. I know this year's first in my region, this year's ambassadors in Uganda. but I'm sure every region has one. So yeah, and thank you so much for listening.
So just to let you know that at the African Union, we are evolving, but we cannot do it alone. Of course, we always need our partners. And when I say partners, it means we need young people, most of all. We also need support from member states. So we are not doing the work alone. We need all of you to be here and to join us. Maybe something else that I wanted to add is that the diaspora is considered as the sixth region at the African Union, and it's very important to have them part of the solution, not only to have them included, but also part of the solution in order to move forward. I would say that especially when it comes to the diaspora, we need their expertise, we need innovation and advocacy, and we also need them to be able to know and to understand what is the priority on the continent in order to be able for them also to support. So please join the African Union movements, and you have the website, you have the social media, you have X, and also we have our Instagram accounts in which we are sharing a lot of meetings, a lot of initiatives that we are doing, and there are many call to action, call to applications in which young people can really, bring their knowledge and can really support in advancing the development on the continent. Thank you.
I don't really have much to add. I would just say just try and follow the right pages. I think for me as an individual, I'm very intentional about who I follow in my social media. Like I said, people have the resources, people know the opportunities, and most of this information is there. The UN Youth Affairs Office currently has a call for young leaders. This Young Leaders Program, I think this is the second year that it's running, and it's closing. The application for that is closing on the 18th, which is this week, right? So that's another platform that you can take advantage of as a young person, because once you are in that space, you open a Pandora box of opportunities and resources as well. And it goes back to what you said. Those resources can also then help you create change from where you come from, because you're tapping into different people, different networks that then can support your grassroots initiatives, for example. And I think in closing, and as we are going, I would just love to leave everybody this thought that, when we think about change and just changing the narrative, it doesn't have to be so grand. You can create change from a very small place. Like Babatunde says, you can creating change from a small place, like create large impact from a small place. You can start with one person. You can start with a small group. It doesn't have to be a large group. Before you know it, it will be a ripple effect. One person, you change one person, another person changes, and you translate whatever it is that you get here to another person. So that's what I would love to say. Thank you so much.